Along with the consolidation, which has proceeded apace and continues today among print newspapers as well as other forms of media, he pointed out the power of money. He specifically called out advertisers, often powerful business interests that the corporate newsmen of his day dared not cross. According to Belloc, the newsman of his day was compelled to respect his advertisers as his paymasters. Today, one could consider it less the powerful solely, or even principally, of the advertisers and more generally the power of special interest, whether business, governmental, well-funded pressure groups such as the LGBTQ movement, or whatever. Those special interests, it seems, now control the advertisers themselves and, for that matter, seem to dictate the censorship and deplatforming policies of big tech such as Facebook and Twitter. But the keys to the power of the mass media are money and reach, and a uniform ideology, or groupthink. With regards to money, in the past there was no widespread challenger to the received opinion of the mainstream media outlets. Of course, there have always been journals and radio shows that went beyond what was acceptably right or left, but as a rule, their money was limited and, as a consequence, so was their reach. Talk radio blew that up somewhat. Rush Limbaugh's massive success drove reach first, then money. But the true game changer has, without a doubt, been the internet. As long as the mainstream media had a stranglehold on the discourse, their ideology and their narrative went unchallenged. As the majority of university journalism professors now embrace leftist perspectives, many even radical leftists, those views are passed on to their students, who then enter the profession with something less than the desired objectivity, perhaps. Even if it were not true that most corporate journalists were men and women of the left, the consolidation of the press has led to the phenomenon of talking points being decimated across the ecosystem so that corporate news talking heads parrot one another. Humorous clips have been cobbled together showing dozens of news anchors across the country using the exact same words to tell a story. Those three factors, money, reach, and uniformity of ideology, gave the media their power and, consequently, a sort of role as kingmaker, and for that matter, unmaker. It is the advent of the great newspaper owner as the true governing power in the political machinery of the state, superior to the officials in the state, nominating ministers and dismissing them, imposing policies, and in general, usurping sovereignty, was how Belloc phrased it. This remained the case until Donald Trump came upon the scene and boldly said that the emperor, that is the mainstream media, has no clothes. The media has been accustomed for many years to framing the narrative, manipulating opinion, and yes, making and breaking political careers, even promoting wars through their coverage or cover-ups. It has worked well for a long time. Consider the famous quote by William Randolph Hearst during the run-up to the Spanish-American War. "You furnish the pictures, and I'll furnish the war." This was in reply to artist Frederick Remington, who had been dispatched to Cuba for Hearst's newspaper. Remington had cabled Hearst telling him that there did not look like there would be a war. Hearst's reply revealed an awareness of his power and a willingness to use it to manipulate public opinion in a desired direction. And yes, of course, there was a war. But the media's ability to drive policy has been greatly diminished in the age of the internet and social media. Non-mainstream media outlets, the free press as Belloc would call them, now have a platform their ancestors would envy. On a more massive scale, President Trump uses the ultimate bully pulpit, his Twitter account, which has more than 70 million followers, to great effect. Now, at the click of a mouse, a consumer of news can fact-check articles, as many are linked to its source documents. A book like this, especially its ebook version, with so many links out to articles and videos, allows for a much more educated consumer of news. We are no longer at the mercy of the narrative engineers of the mainstream media. Their power of monopoly is finally dead. The internet killed it. Donald Trump and his grassroots populist movement Donald Trump and his grassroots populist movement have merely presided over the funeral rites and tossed the first shovelful of dirt over the grave. In terms of the power of the media to personally destroy someone's career, the fact that it has not worked with Donald Trump is an anomaly, for that power remains. But if it has not worked with Trump, that begs the question, why? For one thing, he must be clean, an oddity in itself in Washington perhaps, but he is also willing to fight back. He is one of a kind in his capacity to not only be unafraid of the media, but to campaign on his absolute disdain and contempt for them, which is much deserved in the opinion of these two Catholics for the reasons enumerated in this chapter. Could any other person have withstood what he did during the campaign of 2016 or in the years since? No. He is one of a kind, and this is yet another reason to vote for the man. He is fearless, he is courageous, he is a warrior, and he will not be cowed. His willingness not to be underestimated in comparison with other politicians, and ability to go directly to the people with a bombshell scoop in large part mitigates the following observation by Belloc a century ago. Men gradually came to notice that one thing after another of great public interest, sometimes of vital public interest, was deliberately suppressed in the principal great official papers, and that positive falsehoods were increasingly suggested or stated. Remember his tweets in March of 2017 alleging that the Obama administration had tapped his phones at Trump Tower? They were widely dismissed and mocked by many, but he was right. Not literally perhaps, in his use of out-of-date parlance for spying and surveillance, but essentially, yes, he was right. He put it out there, an idea which once would have been well and easily suppressed by the media great gatekeepers. The essential truth of its claim has been demonstrated right before our eyes over the last few months and years, and there is nothing the fake news can do about it. To again borrow the motto of the Washington Post, democracy was dying in the darkness, but it was the manipulation and suppression of the news and a politically motivated refusal to ask the right and obvious questions on the part of the press that was killing it. It is hoped that future journalists will learn lessons from this particularly disgraceful period of journalistic malpractice.